The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Practical Vedanta, Part 4, Segment 3. Two forces have been working side by side in parallel lines. The one says I, and the other, not I. Their manifestation is not only in man, but in animals. Not only in animals, but in the smallest worms. The tigress that plunges her fangs into the warm blood of a human being would give up her own life to protect her young. The most depraved man who thinks nothing of taking lives of his brother men will perhaps sacrifice himself without any hesitation to save his starving wife and children. Thus, throughout creation, these two forces are working side by side. Where you find the one, you find the other too. The one is selfishness, the other is unselfishness. The one is acquisition, the other is renunciation. The one takes, the other gives. From the lowest to the highest, the whole universe is the playground of these two forces. It does not require any demonstration, it is obvious to all. What right has any section of the community to base the whole work and evolution of the universe upon one of these two factors alone, upon competition and struggle? What right has it to base the whole working of the universe upon passion and fight, upon competition and struggle? That these exist we do not deny. But what right has anyone to deny the working of the other force? Can any man deny that love, this not I, this renunciation is the only positive power in the universe? That the other is only the misguided employment of the power of love? The power of love brings competition. The real genesis of competition is in love. The real genesis of evil is in unselfishness. The creator of evil is good, and the end is also good. It is only misdirection of the power of good. A man who murders another is perhaps moved to do so by the love of his own child. His love has become limited to the one little baby, to the exclusion of the millions of other human beings in the universe. Yet, limited or unlimited, it is the same love. Thus, the motive power of the whole universe is whatever way it manifests itself, is that one wonderful thing: unselfishness, renunciation, love. The real, the only living force in existence. Therefore, the Vedantist insists upon that oneness. We insist upon this explanation because we cannot admit two causes of the universe. If we simply hold that by limitation, the same beautiful, wonderful love appears to be evil or vile, we find the whole universe explained by the one force of love. If not, the two causes of the universe have to be taken for granted: one good and the other evil, one love and the other hatred. Which is more logical? Certainly the one force theory. Let us now pass on to things which do not possibly belong to dualism. I cannot say stay longer with the dualists. I am afraid. My idea is to show that the highest idea of morality and unselfishness go hand in hand with the highest metaphysical conception, and that you need not lower your conception to get ethics and morality. But on the other hand, to reach a real basis of morality and ethics, you must have the highest philosophical and scientific conceptions. Human knowledge is not agnostic to human well being. On the contrary, it is knowledge alone that will save us in every department of life. In knowledge is worship. The more we know, the better for us. The Vedantist says the cause of all that is apparently evil is the limitation of the unlimited. The love which gets limited into little channels and seems to be evil eventually comes out of the other at the other end and manifests itself as God. The Vedanta also says that the cause of all this apparent evil is in ourselves. Do not blame any supernatural being, neither be hopeless and despondent, nor think we are in a place from which we can never escape unless someone comes and lends us a helping hand. That cannot be, says the Vedanta. We are like silkworms. We make the thread out of our own substance and spin the cocoon, and in the course of time are imprisoned inside. But this is not forever. In that cocoon we shall develop spiritual realization and like a butterfly come out free. This network of karma we have woven around ourselves, and in our ignorance we feel that we are bound and weep and wail for help. But help does not come from without. It comes from within our own selves. Cry to all the gods in the universe. I cried for years, and in the end I found that I was helped. But help came from within. And I had to undo what I had done by mistake. That is the only way. I had to cut the net which I had thrown around my own self, and the power to do is within. Of this I am certain that not one aspiration, well guided or ill guided in my life, has been in vain, but that I am the resultant of my past, both good and evil. I have committed many mistakes in my life, but mark you, I am sure of this, that without every one of those mistakes, I should not be what I am today. And I am so quite satisfied to have made them. I do not mean that you are to go home and willfully commit mistakes. Do not misunderstand me in that way, but do not mope because of the mistakes you have committed. But know that in the end, all will come out straight. It cannot be otherwise because goodness is our nature, purity is our nature, and that nature can never be destroyed. Our essential nature always remains the same. When we are to understand to this, that what we call mistakes or evil, we commit because we are weak, and we are weak because we are ignorant. I prefer to call them mistakes. The word sin, although originally a very good word, has got a certain flavor about it that frightens me. Who makes us ignorant? We ourselves. We put our hands over our eyes and weep that it is dark. Take those hands away and there is light. The light exists always for us. The self-effulgent nature of the human soul. Do you not hear what your modern scientific man says? What is the cause of evolution? Desire. The animal wants to do something, but does not find the environment favorable and therefore develops a new body. Who develops it? The animal itself, its will. You have developed from the lowest amoeba. Continue to exercise your will and it will take you higher still. The will is almighty. If it is almighty, you may say, why cannot I do everything? But you are thinking only of your little self. Look back on yourselves from the state of the amoeba to the human being. Who made all that? Your own will. Can you deny then that it is the Almighty that which has made you come up so high can make you go higher still? When you want it is character, strengthening of the will. If I teach you therefore that your nature is evil, that you should go home and sit in a sackcloth and ashes and weep your lives out because you took certain false steps, it will not help you, but will weaken you all the more, and I shall be showing you the road to more evil than good. If this room is full of darkness for thousands of years and you come in and begin to weep and wail, oh, the darkness, will the darkness vanish? Strike a match and light comes in a moment. What good will it do you to think all your lives, oh, I have done evil, I have made many mistakes? It requires no ghost to tell us that. Bring in the light and the evil goes in a moment. Build up your character and manifest your real nature, the effulgent, the resplendent, the ever pure, and call it up in everyone that you see. I wish that every one of us had come to such a state that even in the wildest of human beings we could see the real self within. And instead of condemning them and say, rise thou effulgent one, rise thou who art always pure, rise thou birthless and deathless, rise almighty and manifest thy true nature. These little manifestations do not befit thee. This is the highest prayer that the Advaita teaches. This is the one prayer to remember our true nature, the God who is always within us. Thinking of it always as infinite, almighty, ever good, ever beneficent, selfless, bereft of all limitations. And because that this nature is selfless, it is strong and fearless. For only to selfishness comes fear. He who has nothing to desire for himself, whom does he fear? And what can frighten him? What fear has death for him? What fear has evil for him? So if we are Advaitis, we must think from this moment that our old self is dead and gone. The old Mr., Miss and Mrs. so and so are gone. They were mere superstitions, and what remains is the ever pure, the ever strong, the almighty, and the all-knowing. That alone remains for us. And then all fear vanishes from us. Who can injure us? The omnipresent. All weakness has vanished from us, and our only work is to arouse this knowledge in our fellow human beings. We see that they too are the same pure self, only they do not know it. We must teach them, we must help them to rouse up their infinite nature. This is what I feel to be absolutely necessary all over the world. These doctrines are old, older than many mountains possibly. All truth is eternal. Truth is nobody's property. No race, no individual can lay any exclusive claim to it. Truth is the nature of all souls. We can lay, and who can lay a special claim on it? But it has to be made practical, to be made simple. For the highest truths are always simple, so that it may penetrate every pore of human society and become the property of the highest intellects and the commonest minds of the man, woman, and child at the same time. All these rationizations of logic, all these bundles of metaphysics, all these ideologies and ceremonies may have been good in their own time, but let us try to make things simpler and bring about those golden days when every man will be a worshipper and the reality in every man will be the object of worship.